You know that feeling when something huge happens, something that changes your whole life, and you look back and see the exact moment it started. For me, that moment was hearing my wife, Sarah, laugh. Not a gentle chuckle, not a polite giggle. This was a full-on, head-thrown back, belly-aching laugh. The kind that makes you smile just hearing it. And she was laughing at me. It's funny, isn't it? The book she laughed at, the one I told her I was going to write about her, is now a bestseller. It's sitting on shelves in every bookstore. People line up for me to sign it. They talk about its profound emotional depth and how raw and honest it is. They say it changed their lives. But honestly, it just reminds me of everything I lost. And every time I hear that word bestseller, all I hear is Sarah's laughter. And it breaks me a little more each time. It was a Tuesday evening, almost 2 years ago to the day. We were in our tiny living room, the one with the sagging sofa and the bookshelf, overflowing with forgotten paperbacks. I was sprawled out, half reading an old fantasy novel, half watching Sarah try to untangle a ball of yarn that looked like a bird's nest after a hurricane. She was always trying new hobbies, always making a mess, always filling our small apartment with life. That week, it was knitting. Last week, it was pottery. Next week, who knew? Maybe competitive napping. I remember looking at her, her brow furrowed in concentration, a strand of hair escaping her messy bun. She wasn't classically beautiful, not in the magazine cover way, but her face held so much character. Her eyes, a stormy gray, would crinkle at the corners when she smiled. Her nose was a little crooked, from a childhood incident she never fully explained. She had this way of making even the most mundane things interesting. Like untangling yarn, I watched her for a while, just soaking in her presence. And then it hit me. I am going to write a book about you, I said, not really thinking, the words just spilled out. She paused, yarn still clutched in her hands, and looked up at me. Her gray eyes, usually so serious when focused, twinkled. A slow smile spread across her face, and then came the laugh. It started as a low rumble, then built into that glorious, full-throated peal of pure amusement. She laughed until tears streamed down her face, until she had to put the yarn down and hold her sides. "A book?" she gasped between giggles. "About me? What would you even write? A riveting tale of a woman who spends her evenings fighting with wool and burning toast." She snorted. "Who would read that?" "Everyone," I said, trying to sound serious, but a smile was tugging at my own lips. "You are fascinating, Sarah. You are chaotic and brilliant and stubborn and kind. You notice things no one else does. You make me see the world differently." She wiped her eyes, still chuckling. "Oh, please. You are just bored with your fantasy novels. Go write about dragons or something." "No, really," I insisted. "It wouldn't be like a biography or anything. More like a collection of observations. Moments. Our life together. From my perspective." She shook her head, a soft smile on her face. "You are sweet, Ben. But honestly, my life is pretty ordinary. And you are not exactly a published author, are you?" She had a point. My writing experience amounted to bad poetry in high school. And even worse, fan fiction in college. I worked a decent but dull job in data entry. Writing a book felt like trying to climb Mount Everest in flip-flops. But the idea had taken root and it was stubborn, just like Sarah. "I could try," I said. "It would be for me mostly. A way to remember everything, all the little things." "The little things like me leaving my socks on the floor?" she teased. "Exactly," I grinned. The charm of it all. She leaned over and gave me a quick kiss on the forehead. "You are crazy, you know that. But if it keeps you out of trouble, go for it. Just don't expect a Pulitzer." And that was it. That was the moment. Her laughter, her gentle teasing, her casual permission. I started that night. I opened my laptop, a clunky old thing I mostly used for streaming movies, and stared at the blank screen. For a long time, nothing came. Then I typed the first sentence. Sarah has a way of making even silence feel alive. I wrote about her love for cold pizza for breakfast, about how she always hummed off key when she was happy, about the way she'd bite her lip when she was thinking hard. I wrote about our first date, a disaster that somehow turned into forever. I wrote about the way she'd curl up against me at night, always cold, always stealing the blankets. It was easy, like breathing. The words flowed, driven by a quiet joy I hadn't known I possessed. I felt a sense of purpose I'd never had before. I'd show her bits and pieces, paragraphs here and there. She'd read them often with that same amused smile, sometimes with a blush. "Ben, you are making me sound like a saint," she'd say. Or, "Did that really happen? My memory is not that good." But mostly, she'd just shake her head and laugh again. Her laughter became the soundtrack to my writing. It fueled me, made me want to capture every facet of her, every shared moment, every quiet joy that made up our ordinary, extraordinary life. Looking back, I realize how incredibly naive I was. I thought I was writing a love letter, a quirky memoir of our life. I had no idea that the words I was putting down, the memories I was preserving, would soon become the only tangible pieces of her I had left. I had no idea that this book, born from her laughter, would become a monument to a pain I couldn't even fathom then. And I had no idea that the story so full of life and light in those first hopeful days was about to take a turn into darkness I was completely unprepared for. That happy, ordinary life we shared, it was about to shatter, and the book would become a testament to that shattering. And her laughter, the echo of it, would haunt every single word. I was on fire. Not literally, of course, but creatively. I wrote whenever I could. During my lunch break at work, late into the night after Sarah was asleep. Even scribbling notes on my phone during my commute. The book felt less like a project and more like a compulsion. I wasn't trying to be a great writer. I was just trying to capture Sarah. Every quirky habit, every insightful comment, every small gesture that made her her. I wrote about her obsession with old black and white movies, how she'd quote lines from them at random, usually at the most inappropriate time. I wrote about the time she accidentally dyed her hair bright green, trying to use a cheap box dye kit. I wrote about her fierce loyalty to her friends, how she'd drop everything to help someone in need, even if it meant inconveniencing herself. I wrote about her love for tiny, independent coffee shops, and how she could spend hours in them, just observing people. It was all there on the page, like a living portrait. I'd read sections to her, usually over break. She'd be sipping her coffee, half listening, half focused on her phone. But then she'd catch a detail, a specific memory, and her eyes would light up. "You remember that?" she'd say, a soft smile playing on her lips. "The time I tried to bake bread and it came out like a brick. How could I forget?" I'd grin. We used it as a doorstop for a week. She'd laugh, a warm, genuine sound. Sometimes she'd get a little misty-eyed, especially when I read something particularly sentimental. "You really see me, don't you?" she'd whisper, touching my hand. And I did. I thought I did. But there were things I wasn't seeing, not clearly anyway. Not at first. It started subtly. So subtly, in fact, that I almost missed it. Or maybe I just didn't want to see it. It began with her energy levels. Sarah was always active, always on the go. Even her downtime involved some form of mental stimulation, like solving crossword puzzles or planning our next weekend adventure. But gradually, she started getting tired faster. After a long day, she wouldn't want to go for our usual evening walk. She'd just want to crash on the sofa. "Rough day at work?" I'd ask, rubbing her feet. "Yeah, just really drained," she'd sigh, closing her eyes. "Must be the change in seasons or something." I'd nod, accepting her explanation. It made sense. Everyone gets tired. Then came the little cough. Just a dry, tickly cough at first. She'd clear her throat, sometimes several times a day. "Got a cold coming on?" I'd ask, concerned. "Nah, just a bit of a tickle," she'd wave it off. "Probably allergies. Or maybe I swallowed a fly." She'd try to make a joke out of everything. She started losing her appetite too. Sarah, who could out-eat me on pizza night, would barely pick at her food. She'd say she wasn't hungry, or that she'd eaten a big lunch. I'd notice her clothes looking a little looser, but she'd just attribute it to finally hitting her goal weight. She'd laugh it off, saying, "Look, Ben, all that healthy eating is finally paying off. You should try it sometime." I was so absorbed in my writing, in the happy memories, in the glow of our seemingly perfect life, that I rationalized everything. Fatigue, stress, cough, allergies, weight loss, good diet. We were both busy. She was working hard, I was writing hard. It felt like a normal part of life, just minor glitches in an otherwise smooth existence. But the glitches started to become more frequent. The cough became more persistent, deeper. She'd wake up in the middle of the night coughing, and I'd reach for her, offering water. She'd have a low-grade fever that wouldn't quite go away. She started looking paler, almost translucent. Her vibrant energy was slowly, steadily draining away. One evening, I was reading her a particularly funny passage. I'd written about her disastrous attempt at making a souffle. She chuckled weakly, but then a coughing fit seized her, so violent it shook her whole body. It lasted for what felt like an eternity. When it finally subsided, she was gasping for breath, her face flushed and clammy. She looked fragile, like she might break. I sat there, my half-read manuscript forgotten, staring at her with a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The humor had drained from the room. The casual dismissal of symptoms suddenly felt inadequate. This wasn't just a cold or allergies or stress. This was something else, something serious. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "we need to go to the doctor tomorrow, please." She looked at me, her eyes clouded with fatigue, but also with something else, a flicker of fear, a fear that mirrored my own. She nodded slowly, too tired to argue, too weak to joke it away anymore. That night, as she slept fitfully beside me, I couldn't write. The words which had flowed so easily before seemed to mock me. The happy memories, the light-hearted observations felt out of place. The shadow of what was to come had already fallen over our small apartment. The book, which had started as a celebration of life, suddenly felt like a race against time, though I didn't know it then. I just knew something was wrong. And a cold, terrifying certainty settled over me. The story I was writing, the one about my amazing, vibrant wife, was about to take a very dark turn, and I was powerless to stop. The laughter had faded, replaced by the chilling sound of her coughing in the night. The doctor's office. It always smells like antiseptic and unspoken dread. Sarah and I sat in silence in the waiting room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, casting a sickly glow. She looked tired, her head resting against my shoulder. I squeezed her hand, trying to offer comfort, but my own hand was trembling. Cough had worsened overnight, and she'd been up for hours struggling to breathe. There was no more joking, no more dismissing it. Just a quiet, shared anxiety. When the doctor called her name, it felt like a death knell. We went in and she described her symptoms. The persistent cough, the fatigue, the weight loss, the occasional fever. The doctor, a calm, kind woman, listened patiently, nodding. She did a quick examination, then ordered a chest X-ray and some blood tests. Just to rule out anything serious, she said, but her expression was grim. We both knew she suspected something serious. The next few days were a blur of appointments, tests, and waiting. The waiting was the worst part. Every phone call made my heart jump. Every unopened email felt like a ticking bomb. Kept trying to write to escape into the world of our happy memories, but the words wouldn't come. My mind was a loop of what-ifs. Then came the call. The doctor's voice was gentle but firm. She wanted us to come in right away, both of us. We sat across from her desk holding hands, our knuckles white. She didn't mince words. The tests, the scans, they showed it. A large mass in her lungs. Cancer. The word hung in the air, cold and heavy. A physical presence. It was like a bomb had exploded in our small, ordinary room. My ears were ringing. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Sarah. Her face was ashen, but her eyes, those stormy gray eyes, were fixed on the doctor, unblinking. She was listening, processing. I was just drowning. It's aggressive, the doctor continued, her voice soft. A rare form. It spread quickly. That's why she'd been getting worse so fast. All those dismissed symptoms, all those ignored warning signs, they suddenly became terrifyingly clear, like a twisted prophecy. Denial hit me first. Number, not Sarah, not us. This was a mistake. They had the wrong person. This couldn't be happening. We had so many plans. We were going to travel. We were going to buy a house. I was writing a book about her, for crying out loud. How could she be dying? Sarah was different. She was quiet, too quiet. She asked questions. Practical questions. What stage was it? What were the treatment options? What was the prognosis? She was like a warrior, facing the enemy head-on, even as I was still reeling from the shock. The prognosis wasn't good. The doctor spoke about chemotherapy, radiation, clinical trial. Words that promised hope, but her tone spoke of a brutal fight, with no guarantee of winning. She gave us statistics, survival rates, numbers that felt like a death sentence. We walked out of that office in a daze. The world outside looked the same, but it wasn't. It had irrevocably changed. The vibrant colors of life had drained away, leaving behind a stark, bleak landscape. Sarah, ever practical, ever trying to protect me, was the first to speak. "Well," she said, her voice raspy, "this certainly puts a damper on our weekend plans." She even managed a weak, humorless smile. I couldn't answer. I just pulled her into my arms, holding her tight, as if I could somehow shield her from the terrible truth, from the disease, eating her from the inside out. I felt her fragility, the lightness of her body against mine. Over the next few days, we tried to process it. We told our immediate families, who reacted with shock and grief. We decided to keep it quiet from most other people. Sarah didn't want pity. She wanted to fight it on her own terms. My writing changed drastically. The light-hearted observations, the funny anecdotes, they felt hollow now, insignificant. The book, which had been a joyous celebration, now became something else entirely. It became a desperate attempt to capture her before she was gone, a way to process my own overwhelming fear and grief. I started writing about the doctor's visit, about the diagnosis, about the numb despair. I wrote about Sarah's strength, her quiet dignity in the face of such a terrifying enemy. The words were raw, ugly even. They weren't pretty or poetic. They were just truth, and it was painful. Every sentence was like carving a piece of my heart out and putting it on the page. I wrote about her trying to be brave for me, about her quiet moments of despair when she thought I wasn't watching. I wrote about her losing her hair, about the nausea from the chemo, about the constant exhaustion. The story became a chronicle of her suffering and our shared nightmare. She'd see me writing, sometimes late at night. She'd come out of the bedroom, wrapped in a blanket, and find me hunched over the laptop, tears silently streaming down my face. She wouldn't say anything. She'd just sit next to me, her head on my shoulder, and we'd sit in silence, the glow of the screen illuminating our grim reality. The book was no longer just about her. It was about us, our fight, our love, our impending loss. And then, just as we were starting to cling to a fragile hope offered by the first rounds of chemotherapy, the first real, undeniable decline set in. Treatments weren't working as well as the doctors hoped. Her breathing became more labored, the cough a constant rattling presence. The vibrant woman I knew was fading, piece by agonizing piece. The fight was far from over, but the odds already stacked against us seemed to be getting even longer. And I knew deep down, with a sickening certainty, that the story I was writing, the one about our lives, was rapidly approaching its devastating, unavoidable end. The laughter had long since vanished. Only fear remained. The next few months blurred into a horrifying montage of hospital visits, sterile smells, and hushed conversations with doctors. Treatments which were supposed to offer a glimmer of hope seemed only to hasten her decline. Chemotherapy ravaged her body, leaving her weak, nauseous, and utterly exhausted. Her vibrant hair fell out in clumps, a visible symbol of the disease's brutal progress. She became a ghost of her former self, her once lively eyes now shadowed with pain and fatigue. Our small apartment, once filled with her laughter and her endless projects, became a quiet, somber place. The knitting yarn lay untouched, her art supplies gathered dust. I spent most of my time caring for her, trying to anticipate her needs, offering her tiny sips of water, helping her to and from the bathroom. Every simple task became a monumental effort for her. I kept writing, though. More than ever. It was the only thing that kept me sane. The book wasn't a project anymore. It was a desperate race against time. I wrote about the pain of watching her suffer, about the fear that clawed at my insides, about the helplessness that consumed me. I wrote about her courage, her incredible strength, her refusal to complain, even when she was clearly in agony. I wrote about the quiet moments, the ones where she'd squeeze my hand and whisper, "I love you," her voice hoarse and weak. I'd read parts of the manuscript to her. Not the funny, light-hearted sections from the beginning, but the raw, emotional parts about our present reality. I'd read about her trying to eat, about her quiet tears, about my desperate prayers. She'd listen, her eyes closed, sometimes a single tear escaping. One evening, I read a passage about how she used to dance around the living room to terrible pop songs, just to make me laugh. She opened her eyes, a faint smile on her lips. "I used to do that, didn't I?" she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "You did," I choked out, my voice thick with emotion. "You still do in my memories." She reached out a trembling hand and touched the laptop screen. "Make sure you get it right, Ben," she said, her voice filled with an unexpected urgency. "Don't leave anything out, even the ugly parts, especially the ugly parts. That's real too." Her words were a profound instruction. She wasn't just my subject anymore. She was my collaborator, urging me to tell the full, unvarnished truth. The book was no longer just for me. It was for her. It was her legacy, her story told through my eyes. Our conversations became stark, honest, and heartbreaking. Talks about things no young couple should ever have to discuss. Funeral arrangements, her wishes for her parents, what I would do after she was gone. She was preparing me, trying to make it easier for me, even in her own pain. "Don't stop living, Ben," she said one afternoon, her breath shallow. "Promise me, don't become a hermit. Find someone new if you want. Don't feel guilty. Just promise me you'll live." My chest ached so much I thought it might split open. "Sarah, don't talk like that," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. "You are going to fight this. We're going to fight this." She closed her eyes. "I am tired, Ben," she said, her voice fading. So tired. The doctors tried everything. New experimental drugs, more aggressive radiation. Nothing worked. Cancer was a relentless monster, devouring her from the inside. Her breathing became more labored by the day. She spent most of her time sleeping, only rousing for short periods. The final few weeks were spent mostly in the hospital. The sounds of the machines, the beeping, the hushed whispers of nurses became the soundtrack to our final days together. I slept in a chair beside her bed, barely leaving her side. I held her hand constantly, feeling the fragile bones beneath my fingers. Her skin was so thin, so translucent. One night, the nurse told me to call our families. "It won't be long now," she said gently. My parents arrived, her parents arrived. We gathered around her bed, a silent vigil. Sarah was barely conscious now, her breathing shallow, ragged, but somehow she seemed to know we were there. She opened her eyes once briefly and looked at each of us. Her gaze lingered on me for a moment, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of a smile on her lips. A silent farewell. I leaned in close, whispering into her ear, "I finished another chapter today, Sarah. It's beautiful. You are beautiful." I wasn't sure if she heard me. Her hand, so small and fragile now, twitched in mine. A final squeeze. And then her breath hitched. And then there was nothing. No more struggling. No more pain, just silence. A vast echoing silence that filled the room, the hospital, the whole world. The flat line on the monitor confirmed what my heart already knew. She was gone. My Sarah, my love, my inspiration. The subject of my book, the reason for my laughter and my joy. She was gone. And the world, which had been so full and vibrant with her in it, suddenly felt empty. I held her hand, even though it was cold, even though she was gone, unable to let go. The unfinished story of our lives was now truly unfinished. And the last words I'd written about her seemed to scream out from the pages of my manuscript, a testament to a brutal reality I was completely unprepared for. The race was over, and I had lost. Everything. The immediate aftermath of Sarah's death was a fog, a thick, suffocating blanket of grief that descended upon me, muffling the world. I existed, but I didn't live. Time lost all meaning. Days bled into nights. Food tasted like ash. Sleep offered no escape, only restless nightmares filled with sterile hospital rooms and the sound of flatlining monitors. Her funeral was a blur of sympathetic faces, hushed condolences, and polite questions I couldn't answer. Everyone said how strong she was, how brave. They told me how sorry they were for my loss. Each word, no matter how well-intentioned, felt like a fresh stab to my already bleeding heart. I nodded, I mumbled thanks. I shook hands, but I wasn't truly there. Part of me had died with her. When everyone had left, and the house was empty again, the silence was deafening. Our small apartment, once bursting with Sarah's vibrant energy, now felt like a tomb. Her half-finished knitting project still lay on the sofa, a silent accusation. Her quirky coffee mug still sat in the cupboard. Her scent still lingered on her pillow. Every corner, every object screamed her absence. I walked through the rooms, touching her things, desperate to feel her presence, to bring her back. But there was nothing. Just the chilling emptiness. My laptop sat on the kitchen table, where I'd left it after writing those last agonizing words about her final moments. The manuscript was open on the screen, a painful reminder of everything we had shared and everything I had lost. It was a chronicle of our love, a testament to her strength, and now an agonizing account of her slow, brutal fade. But it was unfinished. It ended abruptly with her passing, a raw, gaping wound on the final page. I looked at it, and a wave of nausea washed over me. How could I ever touch it again? How could I revisit those memories, those terrible final days? It felt like an exercise in self-torture. Every word would scream her name. Every sentence would tear open the wound again. The book, which had once been a source of joy and purpose, was now a monument to my heartbreak, a burden too heavy to bear. I closed the laptop, a decision made in that moment of raw grief. I couldn't do it. I couldn't finish it. The story was too painful, too personal. It was meant for her, for us. And now she was gone. What was the point? Weeks turned into months. I went back to work, a ghost in the machine, performing my data entry tasks mechanically. My colleagues were kind, giving me space, not pushing me. But their pity felt suffocating. I ate alone, slept alone, existed alone. I pushed everyone away, retreating into my own world of pain. Friends tried to reach out, but I couldn't respond. Their attempts at cheering me up felt shallow, meaningless. They didn't understand. How could they? One rainy afternoon, I was staring out the window, watching the drops race down the glass, feeling utterly adrift. My gaze fell on Sarah's old bookshelf. I remember how she would spend hours organizing it, alphabetizing by author, then by color, then by some obscure system only she understood. She always had a book in her hand, always reading. And then I remembered her words. Those last words she whispered to me. Her voice so faint. "Make sure you get it right, Ben. Don't leave anything out. Even the ugly parts, especially the ugly parts." That's real too. And then later, in the hospital the night she died, I finished another chapter today, Sarah. It's beautiful. You are beautiful. Had she heard me? Had she understood that I was still writing, still telling our story? A flicker of something stirred within me. Not hope, not joy. Something closer to obligation. A promise. I had promised her I would write the truth. I had promised her I would get it right. And I had told her I was writing right up until the very end. How could I abandon it now? How could I leave her story unfinished? It felt like a betrayal. I walked over to the laptop, my hand shaking. I hesitated for a long moment, my heart pounding against my ribs. Then, slowly, I opened it. The screen glowed to life, revealing the last words I had typed. And then there was nothing. My eyes scanned the pages that followed, the empty space, the blankness. It was a reflection of my life now. But Sarah wouldn't have wanted it to be blank. She would have wanted me to fill it, to finish it, to tell the rest of the story. My story of her and of our life, even the part where she was gone. It was still excruciatingly painful. Something inside me, a tiny ember of her spirit, urged me forward. It wasn't about publication. It wasn't about being an author. It was about her. It was about honoring her memory. It was about keeping a promise. And it was about finding a way to live with the unbearable, to somehow navigate the vast empty space she had left behind. The silence was still deafening, but now perhaps I could learn to fill it with her memory, with her story, with the words I still had left to write. The pain was still raw, but now a new purpose forged in grief began to take shape. I knew with a heavy heart what I had to do. I had to finish our story. For her. Process of finishing the book was less about writing and more about grieving. Each word I typed was a step deeper into the abyss of my sorrow, but also, paradoxically, a step closer to understanding it. I spent hours staring at the screen, tears blurring the words, reliving every agonizing moment of her illness, her passing, and the crushing emptiness that followed. I wrote about the silent nights, the way her absence echoed in every corner of our apartment. I wrote about the rituals of mourning, sorting her clothes, packing away her things, each item a fresh pang of loss. Her favorite worn-out sweater, the chipped coffee mug only she used, her collection of mismatched socks. Each one held a memory, a story that felt too precious to simply pack away. So I wrote about them instead, immortalizing them on the page. I wrote about the terrible loneliness, the way the world seemed to continue spinning without her, while mine had utterly stopped. I wrote about the moments of utter despair, when I just wanted to curl up and disappear. And I wrote about the small, fleeting glimpses of her spirit that would sometimes break through the darkness. A forgotten note found in a book, a song on the radio that reminded me of her, a shared memory triggered by a random sight. The book wasn't just a record of our love anymore. It was a raw, unfiltered memoir of grief. It was my journey through the valley of the shadow of death, holding her memory tight. It was a testament to the brutal reality of loss, the kind that leaves you hollowed out, but also, eventually, reshapes you. One particularly difficult evening I was struggling with a chapter about her last days in the hospital. The details were too vivid, too painful. I wanted to skip it, to move past it, but her words echoed in my mind. Don't leave anything out, even the ugly parts, especially the ugly parts. That's real too. I got up, needing a break, and started aimlessly tidying her bedside table, a habit I'd picked up during her illness. Under a pile of old magazines and a half-empty water glass, I found a small, folded piece of paper. It was a note written in her familiar, slightly messy handwriting. My dearest Ben, if you are reading this, then I am not here anymore, and that breaks my heart for you. I know you are hurting. I know you'll miss me, but please don't let my story end with me. You are writing our book, aren't you? Keep writing. Tell them everything. The good, the bad, the hilarious, the heartbreaking. Don't let my laughter fade. Don't let our love be forgotten. Let it live on in your words. And please promise me you'll live your life to the fullest. For both of us. You are stronger than you think. And you have so much more story to tell. Love always, Sarah. I sank to the floor, the note clutched in my trembling hand. It was her voice speaking to me from beyond. Her quiet strength, her unwavering love, her incredible foresight. She knew. She knew I would struggle. She knew I would want to give up. And she had left me this, a lifeline, a command, a final act of love. The note was exactly what I needed. It wasn't just a promise I had to keep anymore. It was a gift. It was her way of giving me permission to feel, to write, to heal. It was her final request, and I would honor it. Every single word. So I went back to the laptop. I wrote about the note, about the raw emotion it stirred within me. I wrote about her final words, her quiet bravery, her concern for me even in her own pain. I wrote about the emptiness, but also about the faint glimmer of something new, a sense of purpose forged in the crucible of loss. I wrote for weeks, then months. I didn't care about grammar or style. I just poured out my heart, my memories, my truth. It was a torrent of emotion, a confession, a eulogy, a love letter. Came a living, breathing testament to Sarah, to our love. and to the devastating impact of her absence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I typed the last sentence. Not a dramatic conclusion, but a quiet, almost understated one, reflecting the lingering, persistent nature of grief. I read through the entire manuscript, from the joyful beginnings filled with her laughter, through the crushing diagnosis, to the raw, aching reality of her death and its aftermath. It was all there. Every tear, every smile, every whispered word, every crushing blow. I closed the laptop, a strange mix of exhaustion and relief washing over me. The book was done. It was raw, imperfect, and incredibly painful. But it was finished. I had kept my promise to Sarah. It was a monument to her, a vessel for our memories, a proof that she had existed, that she had loved, that she had truly lived. I had no idea what I would do with it. Maybe it would just sit on my hard drive, a private memorial. But in that moment, that was enough. I had finished her story. And in doing so, I had taken the first shaky steps towards finding my own way forward, even in the unbearable silence she left behind. The silence of a promise kept. The finished manuscript sat on my hard drive like a silent ghost. I had fulfilled my promise to Sarah, but I had no intention of doing anything more with it. It was too personal, too raw. It felt like a sacred artifact, meant only for my eyes, a conversation between me and her memory. Using it, sharing it with strangers, seemed like a violation of that intimacy. I went back to my quiet, solitary routine. The book was a finished task, but my life remained fundamentally broken. One afternoon, my sister Emily came over. She'd been checking in on me regularly, a steady presence in my whirlwind of sorrow. She was one of the few people I still allowed into my space. She saw the laptop open on the table. "Still writing, Ben?" she asked gently, knowing I hadn't touched it for months. "Finished, actually," I mumbled, surprised I even said it. Her eyes widened. "Really? The book about Sarah?" I nodded, feeling a flush creep up my neck. "Yeah, but it's just for me. It's not really a book, you know. It's just a collection of everything." Emily, bless her, didn't push. She just looked at me with that knowing, empathetic gaze she had. "Can I read it?" she asked quietly. "Just a little bit?" "I miss her, Ben. I really do." I hesitated. Emily had been close to Sarah. She understood our dynamic, our love, and she had shared in our grief. Maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be a violation. It would be sharing it with someone who truly understood. "Okay," I said, my voice barely audible, "but it's pretty raw and sad." She just nodded and sat down, opening the laptop. I watched her as she began to read. Her expression shifted as she went deeper into the manuscript. Her brow furrowed, then her eyes welled up. She chuckled softly at some of the earlier, lighter passages. Then a tear traced a path down her cheek as she hit the parts about Sarah's illness. She read for hours, barely moving, completely absorbed. When she finally closed the laptop, her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes held a strange glow. "Ben," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. This is incredible. It's devastating, but it's beautiful." I shifted uncomfortably. "It's just my grief on a page." "No," she said, her voice stronger now. "It's more than that. It's Sarah. It's her voice, her spirit, your love. It's raw, yes, but that's what makes it so powerful. It's so honest. Everyone who knew her, everyone who loved her needs to read this. And everyone who's ever loved and lost needs to read this." My stomach churned. "No, Em, I can't. It's too personal. People would just pity me or think I'm exploiting her. It's not for public consumption." She came and sat next to me, taking my hand. "Ben, this isn't exploitation. This is art. This is truth. This is a story that needs to be told. It's a story about love, yes, but it's also a story about what it means to be human, to face the unbearable, and to somehow keep going. It's a comfort. It's a way for people to understand what grief truly feels like, and it keeps Sarah's memory alive in a way nothing else can. She paused, then looked me dead in the eye. Remember what she said? Don't let my laughter fade. Don't let our love be forgotten. Let it live on in your words. This is how, Ben. This is it. Her words resonated with Sarah's final note. It wasn't just my grief anymore. It was her legacy. It was a promise I had already made. But the idea of sharing it with the world still terrified me. The vulnerability. The exposure. Please, Ben. Emily pressed. Let me send it to an agent. Just one. No pressure. If they don't like it, fine. But you owe it to Sarah. And you owe it to yourself. This isn't just a book. It's a monument. I thought about Sarah's brave smile, her pragmatic approach to everything, even her own death. She wouldn't have wanted me to hide, to shrink from the world. She would have wanted me to be brave, to tell the story, to live. Okay, I finally said, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. One. Just one, and if they say no, that's it. It stays here. Emily's face lit up. She hugged me tight. Thank you, Ben. Thank you. Within days, she had researched literary agents and sent off the manuscript. I didn't think about it much. I assumed it would be rejected, lost in the slush pile of aspiring writers. But then, a week later, my phone rang. It was an agent. She had read the manuscript overnight and was profoundly moved. She wanted to meet immediately. The rapid interest was shocking. Suddenly people were talking about the book, about Sarah, about our story. Publishers were calling, expressing interest. It was a whirlwind I hadn't anticipated, a current that was pulling me along whether I was ready or not. The book born from Sarah's laughter and my quiet love, then forged in the crucible of her suffering and my grief, was about to find its way into the world. And I had a terrifying, exhilarating, and deeply unsettling feeling that my life was about to change irrevocably again. But this time, Sarah wasn't here to laugh with me. The publishing world is a strange place. One minute you are just a guy with a dead wife and a sad manuscript. The next, you are the next big thing. My book, titled simply Her Laughter, after that first defining moment, was picked up by a major publisher with surprising speed. They saw its potential immediately, not just as a story of grief, but as a universal tale of love, loss, and resilience. The process was a blur. Editors, publicists, marketing team, they talked about target audiences, release dates, publicity tour. I felt completely detached, like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. They refined the manuscript, sharpening the prose, making it more accessible without losing its raw emotion. I approved changes, but my heart wasn't in it. It was Sarah's story, not mine to polish and sell. But it was happening. When the advanced reader copies were sent out, the buzz started. Early reviews from literary critics were overwhelmingly positive. They praised its honesty, its unflinching portrayal of grief, its beautiful tribute to Sarah. They called it a masterclass in emotional vulnerability and a heartbreakingly beautiful love story. People were talking. Then came the launch. Her Laughter hit the shelves. A glossy, dignified cover featuring a blurry photograph of Sarah laughing, taken by me years ago. It was everywhere. Bookstores, online retailers, even mentions on news channels. The first week it soared onto the bestseller lists. The second week it kept climbing. And then it hit #1. I was famous. Or rather, my grief was famous. Sarah's story was famous. The public reaction was a strange beast. For every person who wrote to me, deeply moved, sharing their own stories of loss and finding comfort in my words, There were others who were less kind. The internet, true to its nature, became a battleground of opinions.
Exploitive, some cried. He's profiting from his wife's death.
Too much information, others complained. Some things should remain private. This is just trauma porn. He paints her as a saint, a few cynics noted. Nobody's that perfect. Probably embellished. I even saw discussions on forums, Reddit-style threads, dissecting my decisions, my grief, my motives. Is it healthy to air your dirty laundry like this? Someone would post. He's clearly not moved on. There were arguments about whether a book, written by a grieving spouse, could ever truly be objective, or if it was inherently self-serving. People debated the ethics of turning such a personal tragedy into a commercial product. It hurt deeply. These were strangers, judging my pain, judging Sarah's memory. It felt like they were spitting on everything I had gone through, everything she had endured. I wanted to scream at them, to tell them that this wasn't about money or fame. This was about keeping a promise. This was about keeping a promise. This was about honoring a love that transcended death. But then, an equal and often louder wave of support would rise up. Readers who had lost loved ones would write to me, tears in their emails, thanking me for putting their own inexpressible grief into words. They'd tell me how much the book helped them feel less alone, how it validated their pain, how it gave them permission to mourn openly. They spoke of Sarah as if they knew her, as if her spirit had touched them through my words. That was the only thing that kept me going, that made me believe, even for a moment, that publishing this book wasn't a mistake. My phone rang constantly with interview requests. Morning talk shows, radio programs, newspaper features. They all wanted the story, the man behind the bestseller. They wanted the tearful widower, the raw emotion. I put on a brave face, rehearsed my answers, tried to sound articulate and grateful, but inside, I was crumbled. Every interview was a fresh excavation of my deepest wound. Every question about Sarah was a reminder that she wasn't here to answer them herself. The success was overwhelming and utterly hollow. My bank account swelled, but my heart remained empty. I walked through the world recognized, praised, and deeply, terribly alone. The book was a sensation, but I was just a shell. I was famous for being broken. And the irony of it all, the sheer absurdity of finding fame through the most devastating loss of my life, was a constant, bitter pill. The initial laughter which had started it all now felt like a cruel, mocking echo, amplifying the profound emptiness that had become my constant companion. The bestseller felt like a prize I never wanted to win. Her laughter hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. My publisher threw a small private party to celebrate. Editors, agents, publicists, all clinking glasses, smiles on their faces. They congratulated me, shaking my hand, telling me how proud they were. I smiled back, polite and distant. All I could think was how Sarah should have been there. This wasn't my triumph, it was hers. And she wasn't here to see it. Every interview, every television appearance, every book signing became an exercise in emotional performance. Tell us about Sarah, they'd say, their eyes full of manufactured sympathy. What was she like? And I'd talk about her quirks, her kindness, her indomitable spirit, always carefully omitting the messy, mundane details, the arguments, the times she drove me crazy. 'Cause the public wanted a saint, a martyr, not a real flawed human being. I felt like I was betraying her by sanitizing her, but also protecting her. People came to signings with tears in their eyes, clutching their copies of the book. They'd share their own stories of loss, their voices cracking with emotion. "Your words helped me through," they'd say. "I lost my husband last year. or my sister passed from cancer too. I'd listen, offering what comfort I could, but inside I just felt more drained. Their grief, though genuine, only amplified my own. The money started rolling in, more than I had ever dreamed of. It sat in my bank account, a cold, hard reminder of the price of success. I could buy anything I wanted, but what I wanted, I couldn't buy. I wanted Sarah back. I wanted our old, ordinary life back. The one where I had a dull data entry job, and she spent evenings battling yarn, and neither of us had any idea what a bestseller was. Our apartment, the same one where Sarah had laughed at my initial idea, now felt overwhelmingly empty. People advised me to move, to get a bigger place, to leave the memories behind. But I couldn't. Every object, every scratch on the floor held a piece of her. Her faint scent still clung to her side of the bed, a cruel, lingering ghost. I'd wake up in the middle of the night reaching for her, only to find cold, empty sheets. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the cacophony of interviews and public appearances. I'd go for walks, trying to escape the suffocation of the apartment. I'd pass by the little coffee shop she loved, the park bench where we used to sit for hours, the movie theater where we had our terrible first date. And everywhere I went, I saw her. Her ghost, laughing, humming, rolling her eyes. The memories, once comforting, were now tinged with an unbearable sadness. The book had made her, and our life, public. Now everyone wanted a piece of her, even though she was gone. The success was a strange kind of torture. It forced me to relive the darkest period of my life, over and over again in front of a global audience. People saw the best-selling author, the grieving widower, the man who had turned his pain into art, but they didn't see the shattered person behind the facade. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the moments I couldn't breathe, the constant ache in my chest. I often thought about that first conversation, her laughter echoing in the small living room. What would you even write? Who would read that? She had been so sure no one would care, and now millions cared. Millions had read about her, about our love, about her tragic end. It was everything I never wanted, and everything she never expected. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. I had achieved what so many writers dream of: a #1 bestseller, critical acclaim, financial freedom. But I had lost the one thing that truly mattered. I would have traded every single sale, every single glowing review, every penny of the royalties for one more minute with her, one more shared laugh, one more ordinary Tuesday evening, watching her battle a ball of yarn. The book was supposed to be a tribute, a way to keep her memory alive, and it was. But it was also a constant, painful reminder of her absence, magnified by its very success. I was living in a gilded cage of grief, trapped by the story I had written, haunted by the ghost of her laughter. The world celebrated my success, but all I felt was the crushing weight of my loss, amplified by the very thing meant to honor her. I was famous, and utterly, profoundly alone. The bitter taste of fame, a constant reminder of the prize I never wanted to win. Months turned into a year since her laughter became a global phenomenon. I was still doing interviews, still signing books, still talking about Sarah. The initial raw agony had dulled slightly, replaced by a persistent, dull ache. It was like a phantom limb. You know it's gone, but you still feel its presence. The fame felt like a costume I had to wear in public. Behind closed doors, I was still just Ben, the guy who missed his wife. The money, which initially felt so meaningless, now allowed me a different kind of freedom. I didn't have to work my dull data entry job anymore. I could simply exist, and that in itself was a strange luxury. I started doing things Sarah would have loved. I set up a scholarship in her name for aspiring artists, at a local community college, knowing how much she believed in pursuing passions. I donated a significant portion of the book's profits to cancer research, specifically for the rare type that took. It felt like I was, in some small way, turning the bitter fruit of her absence into something good, something she would have been proud of. One quiet afternoon, I found myself sitting in our living room, the one with the sagging sofa. It had been years since Sarah's laughter filled this space, but I could still vividly hear it, a warm echo in my mind. It wasn't the mocking sound it had become during the darkest days of my grief, or the ironic echo it was when the book hit the bestseller list. Now it was softer, gentler. A memory that brought a bittersweet warmth, not just sharp pain. I picked up an old photo album. Pictures of Sarah throughout our life together. Her awkward teenage years, her beaming graduation smile. Our ridiculous wedding photos, where she looked simultaneously beautiful and ready to burst out laughing. And then a photo of her, mid-laugh, from a few months before she got sick. Her head was thrown back, her eyes crinkled at the corners, her mouth wide open in pure, unadulterated joy. It was the same laugh I heard that night, the night I first told her I'd write a book about her. And in that moment, something shifted. I realized the book wasn't just about her death or my grief. It was about her life. It was about our love story, from its quirky beginning to its heartbreaking end. It was about the ordinary moments that, in hindsight, were anything but ordinary. It was about the fact that she existed, and that she had loved and lived so fully, even for a short time. Her laughter in that photo, and the echo in my mind, wasn't mocking me. It was her spirit, still vibrant, still present. It was her saying, "You did it, Ben. You told our story. You kept your promise." It was her way of reminding me that even in the face of immense loss, there can still be light, still be purpose. The book's success wasn't just about me becoming a famous author. It was about Sarah living on. Her story, her spirit, her impact now touched millions of people. It was a testament to the power of love, even in its most painful forms. It was a shared experience of grief, a comfort to those who felt alone in their sorrow. It was a monument, not just to a tragedy, but to a life lived with passion and joy. I hadn't written a bestseller. I had written a love letter, a eulogy, a memoir of grief. And in doing so, I had somehow, unintentionally, built a bridge for others to walk across, to understand their own pain, to feel less alone. And that, I realized, was what Sarah would have truly wanted. I still missed her every single day. The ache in my chest was a permanent resident, but it wasn't a suffocating pain anymore. It was a part of me. A reminder of the deepest love I had ever known. The book was a success. I was a success. But the real success wasn't in the sales figures or the glowing reviews. It was in knowing that Sarah's laughter, the one that started it all, was no longer a haunting echo of my loss. It was a comforting melody, a reminder of the beautiful, chaotic, stubborn, and kind woman who had changed my life forever. It was a reminder that love, true love, doesn't end with death. It lives on, in memories, in legacies, and in the quiet, lingering echoes of a beautiful, unforgettable laugh. And finally, after all this time, I could hear it without breaking.